Before swords ever clash or voices are raised, the outcome of a struggle is often sealed in the private battlefield of the mind. This was one of Machiavelli's most merciless truths about mental combat. If a person's inner resilience has been fractured, if their conviction has been eroded, you have already claimed the victory without ever needing to meet them in direct conflict. A man whose body still moves, but whose inner resolve has been quietly dismantled, is already conquered. The cruel genius in this lies in its subtlety. There is no need to shout, to threaten, or to launch open assaults. The sharpest weapon is a seed of uncertainty planted so quietly they don't even notice it take root. From the moment someone begins to waver in their own presence around you, they are no longer battling you. They are fighting a shadow you've placed inside their head. Machiavelli's rule for exerting dominance was not to be truly formidable, but to be perceived as formidable. Before any rival in commerce, influence, prestige, or even romantic interest ever takes a step toward competing with you, you should have already cultivated an aura so convincing they start measuring themselves against that crafted image instead of who you really are. When those around you falter under strain, you maintain composure. When others talk to fill silence, you let your words come sparingly, weighted with decisiveness. Move with the stillness of one accustomed to steering events. Your record of past victories is less important than the posture you carry, because posture alone convinces onlookers that you must have triumphed in places they'll never see. And the assumption of your success, unverified but believed, will quietly drain the courage of those who might oppose you. The craft lies in restraint. You don't bluntly call someone inadequate, you don't stoop to crude mockery, and you certainly don't openly argue. You let implication do the work. A passing remark such as, "You remind me of someone I once bested," or "This should be interesting. I'm not usually challenged this early," lands more effectively than any insult. Even an offhand, "Don't stress, skill improves with time," can be a velvet-covered blade. These are not overt strikes. They are subtle pricks that make the other person uneasy without giving them a clear reason to protest. Every rival has a locked chest inside them, an insecurity, a hidden wound, a moment they'd rather no one remembers. If you discover it, you never hammer at it openly. You hint, you skirt the edge. If, for example, you know they fear being seen as inexperienced, you might say with a slight nod, "It takes courage to step in early," or "That's the same fire I had when I was new and learning the hard way," or "Impressive boldness," though some might call it overreach. Each of these forces them to glance inward without you naming the flaw. The result is they devote energy to disproving your hint, and in doing so they lose focus, agility, and authority. In truth, you haven't attacked their argument or their skill. You've undermined their sense of self, and once that foundation is shaken, the rest collapses on its own. Dominance is often won not in open contests of force, but in the invisible struggle over perception. Before the direct confrontation, there are bystanders, colleagues, decision-makers, mutual acquaintances. Securing their favor first ensures your opponent enters the arena already diminished. The way to achieve this is to radiate approachable confidence to the surrounding crowd. Use wit that cuts lightly but leaves a mark. Frame yourself as the experienced hand without ever claiming it outright. And then acknowledge your adversary in ways that place them in a junior position. "They've got heart," or "We'll see how they do," or "I recall my own first time in this seat." The beauty is in the tone, not ridicule, but condescension disguised as warmth. Those watching will often adopt your frame without realizing it. When your rival enters a room where your reputation has already been woven into the air, they cannot help but feel smaller. In their mind, they become the outsider, the one pushing against the current, while you are the established current itself. Machiavelli's method was to let them see your standing without you boasting. Perhaps they witness you being consulted for advice, see others react to you with deference, or watch you complete a task effortlessly. This is intimidation by presence, not by force. Let them observe without fanfare. Human psychology will do the rest. When a person witnesses another receiving admiration, they instinctively compare themselves. The comparison shrinks them internally, often without them acknowledging it. This works best when paired with silence. Let them witness your effortless wins without you explaining them, for silence makes the extraordinary seem ordinary to you and impossibly distant to them. The objective is not to overpower them at the moment of confrontation. You need only to make them hesitate, to insert a flicker of, "What if I'm not enough?" into their mind. That hesitation becomes a fissure. You can open it by posing a question right before the engagement. Confident you're ready? Or, have you handled something like this before? Or, let's see how you manage pressure. Spoken with curiosity, not menace. These lines erode certainty far more than open threats. Eye contact becomes your unspoken weapon. Hold it just a heartbeat beyond their comfort zone. Blink less. Keep your gaze steady without hostility, as though you've stared down countless situations before. If they avert their eyes first, they've just signaled to everyone, and to themselves, that the balance has tipped. The greatest battle is invisible. When the real contest begins, they are no longer contending with only you, but with the doubts you've sown, the spectators you've swayed, the persona you've constructed, and the silences you've turned into weapons. Machiavelli understood that the true master of psychological combat strikes long before his target recognizes the game. Confidence, at its core, is not a fixed attribute, but a fragile structure, pieced together from past triumphs, self-image, and repeated moments of validation. Knowing this allows you to dismantle it without ever laying a finger on the person. Once a man's self-belief falters, hesitation takes root, and hesitation, left to grow, becomes defeat. Every individual has a peak performance state, when their words flow smoothly and their movements carry natural precision. But cast a spotlight on them at the wrong moment, and that rhythm shatters. They become conscious of every motion, every phrase. That is when you begin to press, not with force, but with casual observations. Comment on some mannerism they have without judgment. Your speaking style is unusual, or you have a distinctive posture, or I notice you often move your hands that way. These aren't insults. They are gentle nudges that heighten self-awareness. Once they are thinking about themselves instead of the task, their flow disintegrates. Confidence thrives when a person feels rare. So make them feel replaceable. Even if they are skilled, you draw comparisons to someone superior. You remind me of a man I knew. His level was exceptional, but I see some resemblance, or this is solid work, though it doesn't match what I saw last year from someone else. You subtly recast them as a lesser version of another. That shift changes their focus from winning to proving adequacy, and that kills the competitive edge. One of the darker plays is to suggest, ever so lightly, that you are far more dangerous than you appear. Say, "I imagine you've done your research on me," or "I've faced tougher. It can get dull without a challenge," or "I hope you're aware of what you're walking into." Without laying out threats, you let their imagination fill in the menace. In response, they overtrain, overthink, and exhaust themselves before the first move is made. Even compliments can be weapons when they are shaped with ambiguity. Lines such as, "better than I anticipated," or "this might actually be close," or "you've grown since I last saw you," sound harmless. Yet beneath them is the suggestion that you held low expectations, that you remain the standard to measure against. This quietly strips away their stature and turns their energy inward. Silence in social settings can be as unnerving as a shout in battle. Speak only when necessary. When they joke or refrain from laughing. When they present plans, simply nod. When they seek a reply, pause before giving one. This unsettles their rhythm because mystery is more intimidating than any declaration. In that stillness, they start projecting their worst assumptions onto you. And those imagined fears weigh heavier than reality. A person's self-assurance is rarely formed in isolation. It is propped up by the reinforcement of allies, friends, and supporters who echo belief back to them. If you can introduce subtle corrosion into that support network, you can erode their armor without ever engaging them directly. This doesn't require turning companions into outright opponents. It only demands a few carefully placed seeds of uncertainty. A quiet remark to their friend like, "You've got a sharp eye, they'll need that," reframes the dynamic, suggesting the competitor relies on others to hold the line. Before long, those in their inner circle begin treating them as someone in need of guidance rather than someone who naturally leads. This shift in tone is contagious. And once their closest allies stop radiating faith in them, the last scaffold of their confidence collapses inward. One of Machiavelli's most chilling tenets was the deliberate avoidance of naming an opponent as your rival. To acknowledge them in public as someone on your level grants them a status they may not deserve. When you behave as though they are simply operating in a separate, lesser sphere, you deny them the satisfaction of mutual recognition. This absence of acknowledgement cuts more deeply than insult because it erases them from the field entirely. For a competitor who craves validation, the realization that you don't even register them as a threat gnaws at their sense of identity. The most skilled practitioners of psychological dominance win without open engagement. They do not bludgeon. They rearrange the terrain until the opposition finds themselves standing on shifting ground. By the time the challenger arrives, they're already uncertain of their footing, doubting the tools in their own hands. The seat of authority is occupied before the contest begins, and the challenger's energy is spent on climbing toward a summit already claimed. True influence does not always confront. More often, it disorients. Machiavelli understood that the battle worth winning was the one waged within the other's mind. When a person's inner narrative begins to shift from "I will win" to "I must not lose," the momentum has already been stolen. Here lies one of the most unnerving weapons in the arsenal: the projection of effortless dominance. People expect urgency from someone in competition. They anticipate a display of strain, focus, or heightened emotion. If you deny them that, if you maintain an air of calm inevitability, speaking sparingly and observing as though the outcome has been settled in your favor, they will begin to suspect they are chasing someone out of reach. The absence of visible effort makes them wonder how far behind they truly are. It suggests a gulf so wide they cannot hope to cross it. Breaking predictability is another vital edge. Most people operate along consistent behavioral lines. They dress the same, speak with a familiar cadence, respond in ways others come to expect. Predictability allows others to prepare, if you alternate between charm and cutting precision, if you change tone mid-conversation, if you move between warmth and frost without warning, you force them to constantly adjust. This keeps them off balance. A foe who cannot clearly define who you are cannot prepare a strategy against you. You become, in their mind, something ungraspable, and that is more threatening than any fixed reputation. This adaptability can be wielded in every arena. In a meeting, you may sit in silence until the decisive moment, then deliver a statement so exact it silences the room. In social gatherings, you might maintain an easy composure until you suddenly redirect the conversation with a remark that slices to the core. The unpredictability itself becomes the weapon. A rival who trains for one type of engagement will find themselves fighting an unfamiliar battle the moment they step forward. Isolation, too, is a slow but potent dismantler. You need not physically remove people from their circles. You only need to make them feel irrelevant within them. Speak across them in group settings. Divert attention to others before they have their say. Refer to their actions in the third person instead of addressing them directly. Over time, the group will unconsciously mirror your dismissive cues, treating the competitor's presence as peripheral. When they eventually face you, they do so without the energy of social reinforcement. Momentum is a vital nutrient for confidence. Every small success, a point well made, a ripple of laughter from a remark, a nod of agreement from the crowd, feeds the flame. The moment you notice them stacking these small victories, you interrupt the sequence. If they make a clever point, acknowledge it with a nod, but offer no enthusiasm. If they attempt humor, redirect the moment towards something heavier, something that makes their levity seem misplaced. If they start building energy, change the subject to something outside their preparation. Without momentum, they become hesitant. Hesitation leads to timidity, and timidity slides into irrelevance. Everyone enters a challenge carrying a story about themselves. It may be the underdog's grit, the veteran's mastery, the newcomer's fresh perspective. These narratives power their drive. By subtly reframing these stories into vulnerabilities, you make them question the very banner they march under. To the newcomer, you might say, fresh blood can be exciting, though inexperience can cost clarity. To the self-proclaimed veteran, long tenure is valuable, but sometimes it breeds complacency. These are not direct attacks. They are recalibrations that make the individual suspicious of their own identity. Pride becomes apprehension. Certainty becomes doubt. In group environments, humiliation can be engineered without a single insult. When someone missteps or says something clumsy, you do not need to pile on. Simply keep your gaze steady. Let the silence linger. Perhaps glance at others in the room as though to see their reaction. The group will do the rest. A few uneasy laughs, averted eyes, or shifting in seats. The target will feel the sting of collective judgment without you having lifted a hand. That moment of embarrassment lingers long after the meeting ends, and it shadows every move they make afterward. Crucial moments test not only skill, but composure. When tension spikes, when something goes wrong, when the spotlight sharpens, most people display the strain. They speak faster, they grow louder, they explain themselves in excess. If you, in those moments, remain unmoved, your stillness becomes a towering presence. The other begins to wonder if they have lost the upper hand entirely. Even if your position is not as secure as it appears, the perception of control feeds itself, both in the minds of onlookers and in the mind of your rival. Machiavelli's doctrine was clear. It is more potent to command the beliefs of others than their immediate actions. Once you shape a person's belief about themselves, their behavior aligns to fit it, often without them realizing it. An opponent's confidence, for all its shine, is brittle. It may appear solid, but the right application of pressure, the right insinuation, the right silence can cause it to cave entirely. The most complete victories are those no one else can see. The adversary still smiles, still moves with apparent assurance, still speaks as though unshaken, but their voice trembles almost imperceptibly. Their hands hesitate by fractions of a second. Their decisions arrive with delay. You have compromised the framework they depend on to act decisively. You haven't shouted, you haven't declared war, you haven't even acknowledged their place as an opponent. Yet you have made them unsure of their own ground, and uncertainty, once seated, spreads until the collapse feels self-inflicted. One of the most devastating strategies is to outsource doubt. Machiavelli rarely had to deliver the barb himself. He would ensure someone else in the vicinity would drop a remark, an observation, a half-truth into the target's ear. A line like, "I heard someone thinks you're over-preparing. Any truth to that?" forces the rival to scan the room for betrayal. The danger is not in the accusation itself, but in the paranoia it sparks. If they cannot identify where the threat comes from, they start to believe it could be everywhere. Defining the story before your rival steps forward is another form of invisible control. Frame them with a faint compliment laced with doubt. "He's got enthusiasm. Time will tell if it's backed by substance," or "she's fearless, which is admirable and dangerous." You've set a standard in the minds of the audience, and now your opponent must fight to escape that framing rather than focusing purely on excellence. They are forced into a reactive state, and reaction is inherently weaker than creation. Long-term confidence is tied to the belief in permanence. The idea that one's position is stable and lasting. Undermining this belief can hollow someone out from within. Suggest, with casual detachment, people cycle through this space all the time. Let's see how long the wave lasts. Or, it's always good to see new names, though rotation keeps things fresh. The message is subtle. You are not a fixture. You are a visitor. Once they accept the possibility that their presence is temporary, their behavior begins to reflect that insecurity. They tread lightly where they once would have pressed forward with authority. The real artistry in all of this lies in remaining just beyond the reach of direct accusation. Nothing you do is blatant enough to be challenged openly. Every comment can be read as neutral or even generous. Every silence explained away. Every act of dominance masked as ordinary interaction. But beneath the surface, you are turning screws. You are shifting the angles of the stage so that when your counterpart steps onto it, the lights blind them, the floor tilts beneath their feet, and the audience has already chosen where to look. By the time the formal battle begins, whether it's a negotiation, a debate, a performance, or any contest of influence, your opponent is no longer facing only you. They are contending with the version of themselves you have carefully reshaped. And in most cases, that internal foe is far more destructive than anything you could throw at them directly. That is the true Machiavellian victory. To win not through the clash of force, but through the quiet engineering of doubt until the other person hands you the win without even realizing it happened.